In this part of the chapter, we'll be learning about the mineral riches in the soil. Okay, we will be having a look at the soil, what the topmost layer of the soil contains of, what are the important minerals, how the soil formation occurs, and we'll be also having a look at soil erosion. Formation of soil is done, it takes millions and millions of years to form, and it happens by the breaking down of rocks or the degradation of rocks. The outermost layer of our earth is called the crust, and we know that a variety of nutrients, variety of minerals are to be found in the topmost layer. And this topmost layer that we now call the soil was actually found by degradation, by the physical, chemical, and some biological action that happened on those huge rocks. So those huge rocks were then degraded, were then broken down into smaller and smaller pieces, and ultimately they were so fine in the texture and they were so fine in structure that that the formation of soil then occurred. Okay. So over long periods of time, thousands and millions of years, these rocks, they were being acted upon some physical, chemical and biological processes. And when these processes, they happened upon those rocks, that resulted in the breaking down of those rocks into finer particles, into smaller particles that we call soil. Okay. Now, there are other factors that are responsible for the formation of soil, namely sun, water, and also some lichens. So let's learn about them one by one. The sun. This is the first other determinant that is responsible for the formation of soil. Okay. So what happens that the sun leads to the heating up of the rock. All right. And when the rock particles, the bigger chunks of rocks, they heat up, they expand naturally. All right. And during the night time, they when the heat, in the absence of the heat, they contract. All right, so they expand in the presence of the heat, okay, and they contract in the absence of the heat. So this expansion and contraction, okay, it finally results in the formation of some cracks. All right, when you keep on expanding and contracting, some fissures are going to show up on the structure of rocks. Some cracks are going to show up on the structure of rocks. All right. So this results in the formation of cracks, and ultimately the huge rocks, they break up into smaller pieces. So over millions and millions of years, this expansion and contraction, it leads to the breaking up of the rocks into smaller particles. Okay. Then we have the second determinant, that is water. Okay. So what happens is that water, when the cracks in the rocks occur due to the expansion and contraction by the heat that is being given out by the sun, so sometimes water may they seep into those cracks. All right. And then say during the night time or during some colder at some colder areas, those water, they may even freeze inside that crack. And when water is going to freeze, is going to expand into ice. All right. It's going to expand into the ice and is going to become into a solid state, and that is going to widen the gap, or that is going to widen the fissures, the cracks that were there earlier in the rocks. So naturally, it is aiding again into the breaking of the rocks into smaller pieces. The other way by which water helps into the soil formation is by water helps carry the soil, I mean the rock particles from one place to another. During the flow of a river, even horizontally or even say from the mountain slope, all right, the water is bringing up many soil particles, many rock particles with it. All right. So during this descent down, or even during its course in a horizontal path, okay, these rocks, they are caused to rub against each other, and this pathway can lead their breaking up into smaller particles. So water could get into the cracks that are being formed by the sun, and the flowing water, the flowing river, it wears down hard rock over periods of long periods of time. All right. The next determinant that you can see here, like I already told you, is water, and you can see that river is bringing down water. River helps in the bringing down of water from one place to another, and when this happens over periods and periods of time, all right, these bigger particles of rock, they are broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. Okay, So this was a second determinant. The third determinant that we see here is wind. All right. Now, when not hard, when strong winds they flow, okay, they are causing the rock particles to rub against each other. All right, they're causing the rock particles to rub against each other, and naturally, during that rubbing process, some wearing and tearing process is going to happen. So the strong winds, they are causing the rocks to tear down, means to break down into smaller pieces. So when that happens, okay, when that happens during say during the course of a river, or during the when a very strong wind is blowing at a particular area, so some rock particles are they are going to be displaced from their original position. All right, so naturally the formation, the breaking up of these rock particles into smaller and smaller particles known as soil, that is happening away from its original place. All right, so the parent rock means the rock from which the rock which is dividing into smaller particles known as soil. The presence of this rock, the presence where the rock was there originally, and the formation of soil, those two things are going to occur at two different places, because wherever the parent rock was present, it is ultimately being teared down by strong winds, or maybe being carried away by rivers. So its particles are being scattered here and there, and those particles, after over time of degradation and breaking down, they are finally break up into smaller pieces known as soil. Okay. The other determinant are some living organisms, lichen, also moss. All right, so what happens is that these lichens, they grow on the surface of rocks. All right, and if you may remember, they are in a symbiotic relationship with the cyanobacteria, the algal part. All right, so this lichen part, it provides the mineral substratum to the blue green algae, if you may remember that part. Okay, so when growing, since they are providing the mineral substances, so we are going to provide these mineral substances since they are growing on the surface of rocks. So they are going to provide that nutrients from the surface of the rocks. Okay, so they are going to cause some degradation. Okay, they're going to cause some degradation to these bigger rock particles, and this degradation causes the rock particles to break down into smaller and smaller particles. Okay, they cause the rock surface to powder down and to form a thin layer of soil. There is also some presence of moss that also aids in the degradation of soil. Okay, in the degradation of rocks to form soil. Now we'll having a look at the contents, type, and the quality of soil. The type of soil is divided by the average size of particles found in it. Means the finer the particle, the more you say the quality of the soil becomes better. Okay, and the second determinant is the amount of humus. Humus is those decaying organic parts that are present there in the soil. And the presence of humus is very important because humus makes the soil porous. Porous means it makes the soil so finer in pieces, so that air and water is readily able to seep into the soil particles. The more porous the soil is, the more readily air and water particles will be going to seep into the soil. And the production of this humus, this decaying materials, is caused by some natural microorganisms. Okay, the production of this humus is caused by the presence of these natural microorganisms. They aid in the production of humus, and the more the quality of humus in a soil is, obviously in a moderate amount, the better its content would be. Okay, and the better it would help other plants to thrive. So the topmost layer of the soil, this layer of the soil, this contains the humus that is organic in component. Okay, and that aids the living that aids the plant bodies that are thriving on the soil to have more richer and more amount of minerals. Basically, they help in the achievement of more amount of minerals to those plant bodies. The quality of the topsoil is an important factor, and that decides biodiversity in that area. So that it means that the presence of humus, okay, the presence of humus and the presence of humus and the depth of the soil, how much depth the soil, how much deep the soil is going down into, and of course the kind of rock the soil is being formed out of. Okay, the kind of rock the soil is being found of, that how much depth the soil is, and what is the humus content of the soil. Okay, that is going to determine whether the soil is more porous in nature. All right. So these qualities, the humus content, the depth of the rock, and the kind of rock the soil is being formed of, these are gonna determine the content, the type, and quality of the soil, and naturally they're going to determine the number of plants or trees that are going to thrive on that soil. Now, having learned about the content of the soil, let's have a look at soil pollution. Those unwanted harmful components that alter the quality of the soil and make it render it impossible for the plants to thrive. Okay, so there are many fertilizers, of course, and these fertilizers and pesticides that are being used by the farmers so that the crops may not be harmed by insects and other organisms. These pesticides, they are ultimately killing those microorganisms that are responsible for the production of humus. Okay, so they are being used to get rid of unwanted insects that are destroying crops, but ultimately, somewhere or the other, they are causing those microorganisms to be killed that produce humus. Okay, and they kill the diversity of organisms that live in it that produce humus. So harmful pesticides and chemicals, they cause soil pollution. Okay, the now that we have learned about soil pollution, let's learn about soil erosion. Soil erosion is the removal of the topmost layer of the soil. Okay, these topmost layer of the soil can be carried away by strong winds, can be carried away by water. Okay, and this flowing water or wind, if you may remember, was somewhere or the other responsible for the formation of soil. But ironically, these are also the factors that are responsible for the removal of the topmost layer of the soil. That means these are also those components that are responsible for the erosion of soil. And if all the soil it gets washed away, then naturally the area would be devoid of any nutrient or any mineral rich substances that is going to aid in the development of plants. So if there is no mineral, there is no nutrients, there is no soil as such, then the area would be barren, it would be exposed, and nothing would be left except the rocky, grainy particles that lead to no vegetative growth. Okay, so we have lost a valuable resource because very little grow on rock, and that leads to the that leads to depletion of living organisms. To determine this process of soil erosion, let us look at an activity. Here we are taking two troughs and we are taking equal amount of soil in both the troughs. In one of the troughs, we are sowing some seeds. Okay, these seeds may be of some grains, all right, some maize, some grasses. Okay, some seeds that we are growing in one trough, and the other trough we are not adding, we are not growing anything. It's just that soil that we are taken earlier. Okay, then we are going to water both of these troughs, okay, equally. We're going to water till the first trough, the seeds that we had planted in the first trough, that vegetates, that grows, and small leaflets, they begin to come up. All right, then we are going to tilt those both of these troughs like it is showing here in the picture over here. We will tilt these troughs like this. All right, and remember that the angle of the tilt should be equal in both of the troughs. Then again we are going to water, and we are going to water the same amount of we are going to use the same amount of water that we have used in trough 1. The same amount of water we will use in trough 2. And while we are watering, we'll observe that some soil particles, they are being washed down. Okay, and after a while, when you start increasing your water supply in both the troughs equally, in both the troughs, when you start increasing your water supply, you will see that the number of the number of soil particles that is being washed down will double in the second trough. And the number of soil particles, the total number of soil particles that are being washed down in the second trough would be more. The water flow plus the soil flow would be more in the trough in the trough 2 as compared to the trough 1. As you can see here also, there is less water flow in trough 1, but there is more water flow in trough 2. Okay, this is happening because there are plants, we have planted some seeds, so these seeds will have some tiny roots. Okay, and since there are more seeds in a very less quantity of soil, so ultimately those tiny roots, they're going to hold upon those soil, they're going to prevent the erosion, the washing away of the soil. whereas in trough 2 we have nothing. So there is no barrier, no protection that is going to hold onto the soil particles and prevent its being washed away by the water. So naturally in trough 2, the water as well as the soil is flowing freely, whereas in trough 1, there is less water and there is less soil flowing, because the water is also being absorbed by the soil, because water is ultimately being taken up by the roots for the nourishment of the plants. Okay, and there is less soil that is flowing out because the roots are holding on to the soil particles. This leads to the processes that we can um, that we can adopt or we can implement to prevent soil erosion. All right, so the roots of plants, they play an important role, and this we have seen by the preceding experiment. And when we attempt a large scale deforestation, so as you can see here in this animation, we are cutting down trees, so we are rendering those live roots lifeless. Okay, those roots have no purpose now. Since the trees are cut down, the source of life has been cut down, those roots are dead and they won't be holding on to the soil particles. So when in the case of strong wind or in the case of flowing water, nothing is going to be there to prevent the topmost layer of the soil from being carried away. There would be no roots. So naturally, large scale deforestation, it not only destroys biodiversity, means it not only destroys the living organisms that are there living upon all those trees, but it also leads to soil erosion. How is soil formed? We know that soil is formed by very complex physical, chemical, and biological processes. Okay, and the other important elements that aid that lead up to these physical, chemical, and biological process. Number one is sun. We have seen that due to the heat of the sun, the rock particles, they expand, and in the absence of heat they contract, leading to the formation of some cracks, and these cracks, they ultimately break down the rocks into smaller soil particles. Okay, the second is water. That the water carries the bigger rock particles from one place to another, ultimately leading to its breakdown. And this water, it also seeps into these cracks that are being formed by the sun, and the water may freeze in the absence of heat or in very cold temperatures, and they may lead to the whitening up of cracks. Okay, third is the air, or you can say wind. That strong winds, it also cause the abrasion of soil and the rubbing of soil with each other, rock, sorry, not soil, and that ultimately leads to the breaking down of rock particles into smaller soils. The fourth is lichens or moss. They react, they absorb their nutrients, and while absorbing the processes, the secretion and everything, that leads to the degradation or breaking down of rocks into finer particles. What is soil erosion? Soil erosion is the removal of the topmost layer of the soil, all right, topmost layer of the soil from the earth, from the layer of the earth, because this topmost layer, it contains important particles that aids in the growth of plants, that is namely humus. And the last question we have here, what are the methods of preventing or reducing soil erosion? So we know that the roots of the plants, they play an important role. So we know that afforestation would, or the sorry, not afforestation, planting of more trees. All right, so planting of more trees would lead to ultimately lead to the number of increment in the number of roots that are holding onto the soil. So when you plant more trees, as compared to cutting down trees, you are basically increasing the number of roots that are there, that are going to hold the topmost layer of the soil, and that is going to reduce soil erosion. The other methods that you can adopt is related to farming techniques, that you can use contour farming. All right, you must have or you must be studying this in geography, that farming is done along the slopes of the mountains, so that no other reduction of soil can be there. Or you can also look up terrace farming, that the area, that the slope is being cut into long steps, into terraces, so that when water flows, its speed, or when the wind blows, their speed is being reduced, and they are not able to erode as much topmost layer of the soil as they would have had there been no steps or no contours. Okay, and the other method that you can adopt is the the cattle that you let graze upon your open field, you may want to rotate them into other places, because when cattle they eat away all the grass and everything, so naturally there is a decrease in the roots that are present there. Okay, so when you ensure that cattle they are grazing in a rotation, okay, cattle grazing in rotation, that is going to ensure that the vegetation of a particular area is being maintained. It is not being turned into barren, all right, turned into a barren land. So in this part of the chapter, we learned about soil, we learned about the minerals that the soil is rich in. We saw that how soil is being formed, and we also learned about soil erosion. Okay,